Our circumstances don't define us. Our actions do. We all have moments of impact. What are you going to do with yours? Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sweet Life. I'm your host, TJ Sweet. And on this podcast, we are committed to helping you go from where you are to where you want to be. And the first thing we have to do is recognize where we are. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. But first, I want to say thank you for tuning in. More and more of you are subscribing on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube. You're sharing comments back with me. Just know that your engagement matters. You subscribing matters a lot. It allows us to keep bringing this podcast to you. And every time you share something about these podcasts with me or with somebody in your life, it is creating a ripple more than you know. And I hope it also creates a ripple in your life so that you can recognize that you are still learning, you are still growing, and you are enough as you currently are, and you're doing the best that you can as you currently are. And that is going to be the undertone, the message of this podcast today. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Plus, we get notifications on Mondays. You know, we call Mindset Monday. We get those notifications to remind us, one, that we are growing. We are still a wonderful piece of this world that is growing and becoming something new. And every chapter serves a purpose. So this week, we're going to dive into something that has really been kind of a tough thing for me throughout my entire life of trying to earn approval and never feeling like I'm enough and never feeling like just me giving my best is enough, that it's all about performance and it's all about outcomes. And my own inner critic has been helpful at times, but also pretty debilitating and restrictive and not my best source of advice, I'll say. You know, oftentimes we kind of minimize the words we say to ourselves because it just kind of becomes normal and comfortable for us. But this week, I want to really dive into this idea that you are not your thoughts. There's a whole bunch of things I'm going to throw at you here. But really, I just want you to think about, and most of the time, what we're going to think about, what we're going to talk about today is going to be kind of that inner critic, that person inside of you that you're listening to. And there are a lot of people outside in our lives that give us a lot of different and maybe opposing views of ourselves, of our capabilities, of what we're able to do. But if we're being honest, the words that we use ourselves about ourselves are the ones we listen to the most. But that's a choice. That's something it has served us, maybe protected us in the past, maybe prevented us from being hurt. But it also prevented you from pursuing the life you want, the job you want, the relationship you want, the body you want, the finances you want, you name it, whatever the thing is. There are so many different examples in my own personal life that I've recognized that my inner critic is trying to keep me safe. However, there's another aspect to this inner critic. It's also somebody giving you feedback based on habits you've been committed to. So the interesting thing about the inner critic is when you start to think differently, you will start to behave differently. And then that inner critic will start to talk to you differently. So this self-limiting belief, this self-sabotage, call it imposter syndrome, all these different things, right? They kind of all dressed up as pretty much the same thing. And so there's this power that we have over our own minds and our lives that you maybe need to stop and think about. Are you using it for good? Or are you using it to hold you back? And there are times where we just need to be still and listen to the words we're saying to ourselves. And one of the things that I'm wired, some because of my habits, my discipline, my awareness, my self-awareness, I've recognized is probably the biggest part of why I do what I do and how I'm able to do what I do when it comes to reframing and helping people find a new perspective on themselves, their life, their relationship, whatever the thing is because I'm able to see both sides. Yes, most things can be seen as this or that, in the black and the white. People talk about they get lost in the gray. Gray is not convicting, and gray then doesn't create direction. So when you start to really think about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some reframing here today, but reframing is really understanding your thoughts, understanding the whole thing, not just the positive things. We're not just going to talk about sunshines and rainbows today. We're going to dive into really how do you look at the whole truth of the whole situation, not just your perspective, because sometimes our perspective is rooted in self-limiting beliefs. It's rooted on past versions of yourself. And assuming that the critic is going to go away is a recipe for being let down. Assuming that you need both. You need that critic. You need that person who's going to hold you accountable. But you also need to listen to the cheerleader, to the encourager that is seeing everything you're doing, not just the things you're not doing, which is typically what our critic is rooted in. So as we dive in, like I've said, I've already been diving in. We've been at this for almost 7 minutes already. You are not your thoughts. So as I work through some of the things here, I really want you to settle down and think if you've ever felt overwhelmed, if you felt anxious or even ashamed of some of the things that are running through your mind. This episode is also for you. I want to give you this powerful reminder, like I've shared with you already a couple times. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not always facts. They're not final, and they don't define who you are. They can shape who you are. If we're not in control of our thoughts, it will become something that defines who we think we are, not actually who we are. And the wild thing about our brains is oftentimes people, when we think about our thoughts, we don't understand that there are thousands of thoughts that we have per day. My question for you is, how many of those are intentional? How many of those are reactive versus how many of those are rooted in self-awareness and choices and decision and commitment and hope and all the things that you actually want to be feeling? We get to control all of our thoughts. No one or no thing can control our thoughts. Nobody can make us feel anything without our permission. Yeah, feel that. Nobody can make you feel anything without your permission. So if anybody says anything negative about you, they do not have the power and the control to actually change how you see yourself. Your mind is a narrator. If you think about, an audiobook, you think about watching a movie or a documentary and there's a narrator. It's not always a truth teller, though. It's a perspective giver, probably most of the time, but it's not always a truth teller. And that's just something that I want you to pause and think about in both ways, in the negative and in the positive. If you keep telling yourself that you are amazing and you are great and you are successful and you are all the things, but you don't actually feel that and you're not committed to it and you don't have the habits and the work and the effort and the systems and the processes and all that, like you can see how being positive without affirmations, without effort, without discipline can create this kind of false sense of self. But if you're also in the negative all the time, no matter how hard you work, you're also creating then a sense of untrue version of yourself. So that's why I'm saying challenge the truth of the words you're using. Do you say the words and then support it with actions? Because sometimes that story that you tell yourself, that I tell myself, is rooted in fear of growth, fear of what ifs, like all of these different things. But again, we don't actually settle into that. And sometimes the thoughts that we have are repeating patterns from the past. Like I've said earlier, maybe because they're protecting you or serving you or keeping you safe. But you are the observer the listener of those thoughts, not the thought itself, right? So keep that in mind. You're the observer, right? So like an external perspective. And if you don't believe me, tell yourself right now, I am great. I am a believer in who I am and what I am. Say those words, right? It's you're telling yourself those words, but that doesn't mean all of a sudden you've become those words, right? That's the difference between being the observer and being the thought. Like there's a dissonance there to where you don't automatically think it, but you feel it. There's emotion tied to it. There's belief tied to it. There's optimism. There's a little probably uncomfortableness in that. And that uncomfortableness is a sign of growth, not a sign of imposter, not a sign of doubt, but a sign of growth when you say, I am capable. I'm strong, capable, and significant. When you say those things, how different does that sound from what you normally tell yourself? Now, for me, even just saying that out loud gives me energy. You can probably tell the tone of my voice and the energy of my voice and the volume of my voice. But what if you woke up every day telling your story, telling yourself a story of possibilities? That will make you have different habits. If you want to start a new habit, start with how you think about yourself and the new habit. It's very simple. I'm going to drop little nuggets throughout this entire thing. But I really want to, again, like we've had in the past, this format's going to be some main messages and then some things to actually do, because we want some wisdom, but then wisdom in our own lives only comes from taking action. So I'm going to walk through some things here that I prepared for us. And I really want to dive into something that may sound simple, something that may sound silly, but it's effective because of this duality of ourselves that we have. We're constantly in this past, present, and future state of self, but we're also looking at ourselves in a mirror. We're also listening to how we talk about ourselves. But what if you named the voice, the inner critic, the cheerleader, the coach, the supporter, the mentor? What if you named that inner voice? Because we all have that inner critic. It's just going to happen, right? We're always going to judge whether we did or we didn't do the things we said we were going to do. But that oftentimes, unchecked, that inner critic will judge us, bring us down, and create doubt. A simple phrase to remember: name it to tame it. Name that voice to take its power away. Name the fear to take the power away. Name the anxiety to take it away. I used to suffer from horrific anxiety, debilitating anxiety. I couldn't even ride in a car. I was nauseous all the time. I was super socially awkward, in the sense that I was so anxious and nervous all the time. And but once I named it and started to think about why I was feeling it, it starts to really kind of change how you view it and how you handle it. But our inner critic is typically based on our limited mindset, not our limitless mindset. So limited is everything that you aren't, while not paying attention to everything you are. And our inner critic, like I've said multiple times, is keeping us safe, and it's preventing us, whether we acknowledge it or not, from pursuing our full potential, who we're meant to be, most of the times who we already are. Start by giving it a name. And this sounds silly. I've heard multiple coaches and speakers and just great thought leaders say this, and people laugh at it all the time. But once you create a space between you and the thought, if you remember what I said earlier, is observer of the thought versus being the thought. The gap between you and the thought. So you'll hear negative Nancy. You'll hear positive Pollyanna. I've been called that a lot over my days. I had a team in Columbia at ME Healthcare that used to call me positive Pollyanna all the time. But it's just something that whenever you start to name it, you can call it a real name if you want, that brings you joy or means something to you. But once you start to name that voice, you start to then kind of have this observer relationship to the voice as if somebody else was saying it to you. Just like we hear the words from other people, when you start to think, oh, wait a minute, that's not actually me. That's just negative Nancy is the thing that people talk about all the time, or negative Nick, whatever word you want to come up with. But whenever you start to recognize that, it turns the volume down on that voice. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to that person anymore, even though it's you. I know it sounds silly, but if you do that more often, you're like, no, 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 no. Like self-awareness, I'm not doing that today. I'm not thinking that today. I'm not judging myself today. Just like when you hear other people say things to you, you start to like recognize whether or not you want to go with it. When you start to name this voice, you'll start to do the same thing. I know it sounds silly, but believe me, it works. I don't have any of this stuff that I haven't done myself, that I haven't tried myself, that I don't implement myself. This isn't just theory. This is actual practical application that has been really powerful for me. So after we've named the voice, it's really important to settle down. Again, this is where stillness comes in, but really kind of interrogate the thought. So not every thought deserves your trust. It's really, really important to doubt your doubts. Think about why you have the thought in the first place and when did you start having that thought? Because we've typically outgrown how that thought was keeping us safe or protecting us from before. Or maybe it's somebody in our life that we used to really lean on and look up to, used to make us think that thought, or used to tell us the thought all the time, and then we adopted it and made it our own. So once you move beyond it, all right, after you've been able to kind of really think deeply about it, I want you to slow down and really take inventory and kind of write down some of these thoughts. And this is going to be one of my calls to action here in a little bit. But if you think about something or say something enough, you actually start to believe it to be true. So oftentimes people question me on that. The negative things you've been saying to yourself about yourself, you've been living that out. You've been affirming that every day. You actually start to believe it's true. And the reason why I know that's possible is because there's a lot of people in my life that I share very different perspectives, how I see them. And no matter what I say, they don't believe me. They think I'm lying to them when I say that they're smart, when I say that they're making a difference, when I say that they've made a tremendous impact in my life, when I say that they're beautiful. They don't believe me no matter what I say, because they've believed so much and thought about so much the opposite that they just believe it to be true. They think I'm lying. They think other people are lying. And again, if we don't believe something about ourselves, it doesn't matter how many times somebody else says something in the opposite direction, we will not believe them. It'll create this gap between our thoughts and other people. We'll start to lose trust in other people giving us real feedback because we believe in our own critic so much. So what are you focusing on right now about yourself? What are you repeating about yourself? Is it I am statements or I am not statements? Is it I can or I can't? Is it I will or I should have? Which thoughts are getting most of your attention right now? And this is something I share with my team. Are you speaking about yourself and about your life and about your capabilities? Are you speaking more in possibilities or probabilities? There's a space for both, but my nudge is to spend a little bit more time in possibilities, because the fact that you're listening to a podcast tells me that you believe in possibilities more than probabilities. But you're going to have to stop and think about, why am I judging it and critiquing it all so much? It's probably because you're more in the probabilities instead of the possibilities. So whenever you're in this space and you're interrogating that thought, just a few simple questions. Is it true? Your thought? Is it your perspective? Do you know everything about it to have the conviction to say that it's true? Is it helpful? Your thought? And is this something you would say to somebody you love? Now, I want to speak on that, because this is something I've had to overcome in my life. I haven't had a lot of self-love or a lot of love for myself throughout my years, as an adult, even as a child, truthfully. So if I asked you to write down a list of things you love, how long would it take before you showed up on that list? Now, for the first probably 30 years of my life, I never even would have been on the list. But as I started to really pay attention to my thoughts and my actions and my behaviors and my dreams and my hopes and my conviction, all that, I really started to recognize that how I see myself is how I will then think about myself and treat myself, treat my body, everything, and then how it directly impacts everybody else around me. So the inner critic and the thoughts that you're sharing, would you say that to someone you love? And if most of the time when I say this, the answer that people give me is, well, no. Why is it so commonplace? Why is it so accepted for you to say it to yourself then? Think about those two things can't be true. If you love yourself and you would never say the things that you're thinking to someone you love, maybe it's the thoughts, but it's maybe also how you see yourself and what you feel like you deserve to hear. You deserve to be encouraged. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be bold and vulnerable and courageous and pursue what you want. Because whenever you give advice to your friends, it's already inside of you. Okay, think about that. It's already inside of you. If one of your friends says they're wanting to start something new, how do you respond to them? Now, some people may respond in a negative, condescending, judgmental way, of which I'd love to chat with you about that. But a lot of you, especially listening to this podcast, are encouragers. You want them to succeed. You want them to be happy. You're growth mindset people. You are rooted in love and faith and courage and encouragement and having people be at their best because you want the best for other people. And all that really tells me is you have it inside of you to tell yourself a new story. You don't have to learn something new. You don't have to think differently to give a friend a loving word or advice. It's already inside of you. You just have to learn how to see yourself and your thoughts differently. And if you answered no to is this the way that I would talk to somebody that I love? It's time to let go of that thought about yourself. You don't have to believe everything you think, but believe in your capabilities to have new thoughts. And then this last thing I want to talk about before I get into how do we do all these things is I want you to spend more time studying yourself more than you study others. Because when you know yourself better, you stop comparing yourself to other people. And then you stop thinking I'm not good enough because you think they're better than you. Anchor, right? Anchor is stability, not holding you back, but anchor in who you really are. We don't fail in who we are meant to be or who we should be or who people want us to be. We often just fail at being who we actually are because we've lost sense of that because of this critic. Not who we used to be, not who we want to be, but who you actually are. And your thoughts might be simply like, I'm not good enough. And there's so much around these days of you are enough being so powerful. And you are enough doesn't mean that you aren't growing. It doesn't mean that you're becoming. It means you're enough to love yourself, to be accepted, to be loved, to be cherished, to be adored, to be respected. You're enough for all those things. Now, you are enough means that you have the foundation to be everything that you want to be, everything that you can be with who you are, as long as you maintain that deep sense of who you are. But your truth is stronger. Your truth is stronger than the I'm not good enough thoughts. That's oftentimes other people make you feel something because they say they're not happy because of you, or you didn't do something and now it did, affect them in a negative way, whatever it is. A simple reframe of the I'm not good enough or I'm not anything enough. A simple reframe can be everything that you need. It takes time. It maybe creates a little dissonance in who we are, a cognitive dissonance at first, because we don't believe it first, because we're so rooted in the other thing. But what if you go from I'm not good enough to saying I'm not as great as I'm going to be yet? I know we've talked about it many times, but I'm going to remind you again because I have so many conversations with people about this word yet. Yet is possibilities. Our brains, it's like not finishing the sentence, not finishing our behaviors and our thoughts. Because once we understand that the word yet at the end of a sentence gives life to our next action and our next thought. When you say, I'm not good at this, you can simply say, I'm not as good as I'm going to be, but I'm committed to doing the work. I'm not happy. I'm not as happy as I'm going to be, but I know I believe in what's possible for me. Because when you start to use the word yet, it gives power and meaning to your efforts. And through neuroplasticity, which we've talked about before, is the brain's ability to create new patterns and to learn and to grow. But when you start to understand that what you do matters, which also means what you don't do matters. But when you start to pay attention to what you do matters, you start paying attention to what you're doing. If you don't wake up on time and it doesn't matter, you're teaching your brain that it doesn't matter if you wake up on time. But if you wake up on time and you do something and you have the conviction, because that's who you are, because you're going to do this thing in the morning, you're going to read or meditate or sit in the sauna or do a cold plunge or do yoga or just sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Maybe you're going to read, whatever the thing is. When you say, I am that kind of person, and then when you have the choice to do or not do the thing you said you were going to do, that's when you're really affirming who you actually are. And you're closing the gap between who you actually are and who you say you want to be. Because when you say who you want to be, you're actually breathing more life into actually who you are. You're just trying to shed the belief of who you thought you needed to be or how other people viewed you. Discipline becomes energy. Okay. Discipline becomes energy giving when you start paying attention to what you're doing, and it stops becoming cortisol producing. So oftentimes the word discipline makes people stressed, makes people think about sacrifice and neglect, and the things they want to do aren't the things they get to do anymore. But when you reframe discipline as, I'm going to be disciplined now so I can be free forever. I'm going to be financially disciplined. I'm going to be physically disciplined so that I can be free later. Okay. So again, discipline leads to freedom. But when you really start to believe in the get to instead of the have to for your habits, for your thoughts, your efforts, and your consideration for yourself, for others, and the effort required to do whatever you want to do will be completely transformed. So when you focus on the get to instead of the have to, when you say, I get to get up early, I get to go to work, I get to have this conversation, I get to talk to this person, I get to eat this food, I get to have this workout, I get to listen to this podcast. I don't think most of you are here because you have to. I'd love to chat with you if you feel like you have to, but most of you I know are here because you feel like you get to. But do you say it like that? Or do you just say, I listen to a podcast? What if you said, I'm somebody who's growing and I grow when I listen to a podcast? Because that's actually who you are. If you're here with us, that's what you actually are. But remind yourself on a routine basis, when you're talking about who you are, remind yourself that I am learning, I'm showing up, I am worthy of growth. The reason why that first book that I wrote is the 3-2-1, which is 3 things you're grateful for, 2 things you appreciate about yourself, and then an I am affirmation. That I am affirmation is so rooted in for you to learn more about how you feel and who you are. And typically that statement of I am is going to dictate your level of belief and hope and gratitude and optimism and love and commitment and discipline. When you say, I am happy, I am healthy, I am committed, I am disciplined, whatever the thing is, when you actually feel that, don't just write it down because you want to feel that. But when you actually give yourself space to actually feel what you're feeling and affirm that, is that something you want to feel? And if it's not, be curious about it. Why do you feel it? What do you want to feel? And how can you take action to actually change that response? And write down, this is just something too that understanding that thoughts come and go. Like I said, the amount of thoughts we have in a day is in the thousands of thoughts. But your identity, how you see yourself, stays. Thoughts pass, identity stays. So understanding that your thoughts come and go, but how you think about yourself and how you identify yourself stays. So I'm going to give you 3 quick things you can do. I'll run through them quickly so that you can start taking action now. Create a thought tracker. So the first thing is create a thought tracker. So you have to understand, like I said in the beginning, where you are so that you can determine where you want to be and recognize the growth. So every time a negative thought comes up in your brain about yourself or about your capabilities, write it down and then write a truth about yourself that reflects something a little differently. So this is a simple reframing exercise. So when your thought is potentially, I'm failing, write down, I'm learning and I'm getting better every day. Just oppose it. Just change the narrative about the same belief that you have in the moment. The second thing is to name your critic. Again, we talked about this earlier, but give it a playful name if you want. But start noticing when that voice shows up and talk back to it like you do for other people who talk to you, because it's not in charge. That inner critic is not in charge of you. It's a guide. It's somebody giving you feedback. It's a version of you giving yourself feedback, but it's not always true. And then the third thing is this last thing of practicing one grounding affirmation daily. So when you affirm who you are, your brain will find ways to create habits to align with that affirmation. Pick one of these if you want. I'll give you an example. I have a whole slew of these, and I would love to help you. Put in the comments if you have questions about any of this, because I'd love to respond and pour into you. But what if you wrote down one of these affirmations? Here's a couple examples. I am not my thoughts. I am the thinker of my thoughts. I choose which thoughts I feed. I'm growing in truth, not fear. And say something like any of those out loud every morning. Say, I am strong, capable, and significant. I am capable of doing amazing things. I'm worthy of the love I desire. I'm capable of creating a life I'm excited about. Whatever your affirmation statement is, say it routinely, say it daily, and just watch over time. It takes 59 days to create this habit that doesn't create dissonance in our brains. But say those words out loud, because right now you're already filling your brain with other words that may not be getting you closer to where you want to be. So use the affirmation daily. So as I wrap up here, I just, I wanted to share something as I was working on this content for you. You are not broken because you have negative thoughts. It's not too late. Last episode, we talked about it not being too late. You can always, in any moment, change the way that you think. And like we used to close every podcast saying that you always have the power and the choice to reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. You have the power and the choice to tame that inner critic that is maybe preventing you from being everything that you already are and being everything that you know you can be. You're human. You're not broken because you have an inner critic. The inner critic is often a great sign of growth, but you're powerful. You're capable and you're powerful to change the narrative in your own mind. You are capable to have new thoughts, to create new thoughts, and to train yourself to think differently and behave differently. And you always have this power in the choice. So as you think about your own inner critic, don't create it in your brain like an adversary. See it as somebody giving you feedback, and then recognize whether or not you believe in it anymore as well. So thank you for tuning into this episode. I'm extremely grateful for you. I hope your inner critic is just a little quieter today and this week, and maybe for the rest of the year, because what you're capable of, that inner critic doesn't know. The inner critic only knows what you've done, not what you're capable of doing. Start to believe in yourself. And I appreciate you. Hit subscribe on that, whatever platform you're listening on or watching on. Hit subscribe so you get notifications when these episodes come out every Monday. And I believe in you. I believe in what you're capable of. Now it's your turn to go be your best for the rest of your life. Until the next episode, go be great.